on this episode: epic heroes, mythical entities, and legendary villains. Whenever Aleksandr Rou is mentioned, he is often introduced with a unique unofficial title, Сказочник. The Soviet director earned this title, meaning roughly the teller of fairy tales, after dedicating the majority of his career to bringing Russian folk tales to the silver screen. Ignoring the opinion of his contemporaries that fairy tales had no ideological value, Rou made picture after picture entertaining children and adults. With elaborate costumes and sets, charismatic heroes, and quirky villains, Rou's films have a quality which to a person unfamiliar with Russian folklore may seem dreamlike, surreal, or even nightmarish. Alexander was born on March 8, 1906 in Yuryevets, a small but ancient Russian city on the shores of the Volga River. His father, Arthur Rowe, an Irish engineer from Wexford, left Russia when the First World War began. Alexander and his Greek-born mother, Yulia, moved to Sergiev Posad, a small town near Moscow and the home of a famous monastery. Aged about 10, Alexander was helping out at the church which his religious mother attended, and sold household goods on the street. Going to school in the 1920s, Rowe first approached economics, but quickly changed his mind and studied drama instead. In 1930, Rowe graduated from Boris Tchaikovsky Film School. Arriving at Mezhrapom Film Studio in Moscow, Rowe turned out to be incredibly lucky. His mentor was none other than prolific director Yakov Protazanov. Learning from Protazanov, Rowe served as assistant director on St. Jorgen's Day, Marionettes, and Without a Dowry. At the same time, Rowe explored an interest in acting, but abandoned that pursuit in favor of directing. An outgoing and charismatic man on the film set, Rowe preferred to keep his personal life private, and the details of his marriages are extremely vague. What is known is that he had a small role in Protazanov's 1936 film On the Oddities of Love. So did fellow actress Yelena Savitskaya. The two married shortly after, but apparently the marriage did not last. In the mid-1930s, the Soviet government recognized the need for children's films. Mezhrapom Film Studio was renamed to Soyuz Det Film, a name reflecting its new mission of making movies for a younger audience. Fellow director Alexander Ptushko made innovative pictures with fascinating special effects, which inevitably ended on an ideological note. Some colleagues suggested that a fantasy story would be more fitting for the realm of animation. Still, Rowe knew exactly what he wanted to do and insisted on making a film based on a Russian folktale. Wish Upon a Pike is Rowe's debut picture, and one we briefly talked about in a previous episode, along with Rowe's other early works. A young man named Yemelya catches a magical fish who grants him wishes. Instead of asking for untold riches, Yemelya uses the wishes for doing household chores in his village and for easier transportation. The young man answers the challenge of the king and succeeds in making the perpetually sad Princess Nesmyana laugh. Magic fish aside, the story is set in a typical Russian village, and it is this connection to the traditional culture which would become the staple of Rowe's finest works. The success of the first picture allowed Rowe to continue making fantasy films, now with more confidence and a bigger budget. In Vasilisa the Beautiful, three brothers look for their brides by shooting arrows. The youngest, Ivan, comes home with a frog, who turns out to be the titular Vasilisa, with a curse placed on her by the three-headed serpent Gorenich. When Vasilisa is taken away, Ivan sets out on a quest to find a magic sword and finally defeat the villain. Once again, the film begins in a traditional village setting, but later features elaborate fantasy sets and background matte paintings. After the filming, Rou married Irina Zarubina, who played the role of Melania, and the two had a daughter, Tatiana, in 1940, though once again, the marriage did not last. The second villain of Vasilisa the Beautiful is Baba Yaga, a folk character traditionally depicted as an old witch. After some deliberation on which actress to cast, the role went to a most peculiar person and Rou's lifelong friend, Georgy Milyar. Milyar, who already starred in Rou's first film as the Foolish Tsar, was also a son of an immigrant. Long wanting to play a villain, he was finally given the chance by Rou and did not disappoint, earning the unofficial joke title, Chief Baba Yaga of the USSR. From this point on, Milyar was almost always present in Rou's works, usually as an evil character, comic relief, and sometimes both. If that wasn't enough, Milyar would often play more than one character in a single picture. His thin frame, creaking voice, and diverse roles earned Milyar the status of an unforgettable actor. For his third picture, The Humpbacked Horse, Rou applied a new medium with the experimental bipack color technology. On an errand for a greedy king, Ivanushka departs on a journey to retrieve a princess, assisted by a magical miniature horse which can talk and fly. After flying up to the sky and traveling to the bottom of the sea, Ivanushka finds the princess, who is understandably reluctant to marry the king. The bipack color technique produced colors which were somewhat unnatural, perhaps enhancing the fantasy tale, but doing no favors to the titular magical animal, with poor performance in dark environments. Still, the film was another success for Rou. The sudden invasion of the German forces in 1941 interrupted all film work, and, along with Moscow's film studios, Rou evacuated to Almaty in Kazakhstan, where he contributed to war anthologies, short propaganda films designed to raise morale of the troops. Even during the war, Rou continued work on another fantasy film, one which would be appropriate for the great struggle the Soviet people were going through. Released shortly after the Victory Day, Cashier the Immortal is based on a Russian tale of an undead warlock whose evil forces raid a village and kidnap the young Marya. Her beloved Nikita sets out to find her, on the way stopping by an Arabic city and rescuing Bulat, an innocent prisoner. Nikita and Bulat infiltrate Kashchey's fortress, where they learn that defeating an immortal king will be no easy task. The massive battle against an army of evil during the finale perfectly captured the victory spirit. It is no coincidence that Sergey Stalarov had the lead role. He played a hero in a previous Rou film, and many remembered his patriotic character opposite Lyubov Orlova in Circus. The increased censorship after the war caused a reduction in film output, and many genres, including fantasy, fell out of style. Rou spent some time in Crimea making documentary films, learning to use the new 3D technology. At some point, he met and married one Yelena Grigorievna, although details about her are essentially non-existent. Traveling all around the world, Rou was particularly fond of Africa, where he visited 22 countries and brought back a large collection of souvenirs. Carefully moving back into fantasy, Rou turned to the famed 19th century Russian-Ukrainian writer Nikolai Gogol. May Nights, Rou's first full-color film at the recently renamed Gorky Film Studio, takes place in a traditional Ukrainian village. A young couple, Levko and Hanna, come across an abandoned house. Levko explains that a long time ago, a witch married the man who lived there and caused her stepdaughter to drown herself in a lake. Later, it's up to Levko to avenge the ghost of the drowned maiden. As an experiment, Rou incorporated animated elements and produced the film in 3D as well as a regular release. Unusually for Rou, he directed a film at Yerevan Studio in Soviet Armenia. In The Secret of Mountain Lake, an old man tells a story of a young woman who went into the mountains to get water, but was confronted by a giant rock creature. The children who listen to the story ridicule the old man, and the geologists they meet say that everything can be explained by science. As the young pioneers help adults with research, they accidentally discover a cave with traces of an ancient civilization. This adventure film has few fantasy moments typical of a Rou picture, and enjoyed only a limited popularity. Rou's next film is even more unusual, as it doesn't have anything to do with fantasy. A Precious Gift is a comedy about Carp, an enthusiastic fisherman who is going on a fishing trip on his birthday. An unexpected relative arrives from a distant region with a giant pike fish, and the family comes up with a plan to surprise the birthday man by hooking the fish onto Carp's line. The plan doesn't go well, as another man catches the prize fish. The picture was not successful, although it demonstrated that Rou can make an entertaining comedy film. Rou was finally able to return to a fantasy work with The New Adventures of Puss in Boots, roughly based on a famous tale of a magical feline. The film employs a framing narrative of a young woman in the present time who sees the story as a dream, including many of her friends and relatives. A young man named Vanya inherits a cat, who is able to turn into a human. The casting of veteran actress Maria Barabanova as the Puss may seem strange, but she brought unlimited energy and character to the set despite her age. Similar to the original story, Puss helps his owner to become an important nobleman and to catch the attention of a princess, and not even an evil old witch can stop him. In yet another experiment, Rou made a ballet film, namely Sergei Prokofiev's version of Cinderella. Just like in the stage performance, there is no dialogue, and all interaction happens through dance. Co-director Rostislav Zakharov took care of the choreography, while Rou added his trademark magic elements. Bolshoi Theater provided the cast, including acclaimed dancers such as Raisa Sturchkova as Cinderella and Gennady Ledakh as the prince. After a decade and a half of distractions and experiments, Rou was able to return to his true passion. In The Magic Weaver, an unnamed soldier is returning home, but stops to help Ivanushka, a young boy who is looking for his mother, Marya. As it turns out, Marya was kidnapped by Vodokrut XIII, an underwater king. The soldier and Ivanushka travel to Vodokrut's surreal kingdom to rescue Marya, but the king and his faithful amphibian minion Krok are not eager to give her up. In a return to form, Rou's films once again had elaborate sets, painted backgrounds, and amusing movie magic. When Rou was about 7 years old, Vladislav Starevich directed The Night Before Christmas, an innovative silent fantasy film with a multitude of special effects based on another story by Nikolai Gogol. Almost 50 years later, Rou remade the strange comedy, now in color and using contemporary technology. In a traditional Ukrainian village, a witch and her imp friend steal the moon from the sky, plunging the settlement into darkness. In the meanwhile, Vakula the smith is trying to confess his feelings to the pretty Oksana, but he is rejected with an impossible request. Mirroring Gogol's quirky writing style, Rou seamlessly combined the Ukrainian folk customs and the peculiar characters of the supernatural world. In the late 50s and early 60s, Soviet fantasy saw a trend of films in which ordinary schoolchildren encounter magical beings or travel to another world. In the Kingdom of Crooked Mirrors, a lazy schoolgirl named Olya walks through a mirror to find herself in a strange world where she meets her twin image, Yellow. The girls make friends and find disguises as they attempt to free the kingdom from the rule of its stupid king. The real danger lies in the king's three ministers and some of Rou's most memorable villains yet, Kite, Toad, and Viper. Possibly a satire of a capitalist society, the film lampoons Styliagi, a youth movement obsessed with the Western pop culture. Filmed at the Yalta branch of the Gorky studio, the pleasant Crimean landscape is complemented by impressive matte paintings and forced perspective trickery. Rou once again returned to the topic of Russian fairy tales with his 1965 film Morosko, a version of which was dubbed into English as Jack Frost. Very popular to this day, the film is perhaps one of the more bizarre to a Western viewer. Ivan, a self-absorbed young man, meets a miniature magic mushroom wizard who gives Ivan a gift but then punishes him for poor manners by turning him into a bear. Ivan earns his humanity back by doing good deeds. In another part of the story, young girl Nastenka is sent into a freezing forest by her evil stepmother and arrogant stepsister. Morosko, a traditional winter spirit, finds her, but living in his ice palace proves dangerous to a living being, and it's up to Ivan to save her. Georgy Milyar returns in his signature role as Baba Yaga, changing the character from a mean witch to a tired old trickster. Morosko ended up as one of Rou's most acclaimed pictures, even earning the Lion of San Marco Grand Prize at the 1965 Venice Film Festival. By the mid-1960s, Rou's name was synonymous with the master of fantasy. Often working with the same people from project to project, Rou kept a familiar secondary cast, including the iconic Georgy Milyar. Anatoly Kubatsky ruled as the king of whatever magical kingdom the story took place in. Aleksandr Rou had many small supporting roles, as well as the titular Morosko. Lev Potemkin followed Rou since his earliest films, typically as a military type or a bandit. Vera Altayskaya made a memorable minor villain or a mean stepmother. And starting with Morosko, Rou's films would be introduced through the fourth wall by storyteller Anastasia Zuyeva. The title of the film, Fire, Water, and Brass Pipes, refer to the three challenges its hero Vasya must face in order to rescue his beloved Alyonushka. First, he helps a king whose palace is on fire. Then, he must find a way to free himself and others from a ruler of an underwater kingdom. It is the third challenge, however, which gives Vasya the most trouble. The cryptic brass pipes, which stand for the fame and glory he receives from the final king. Georgy Milyar reprised two previous roles in the film, less serious versions of Cashier the Immortal and Baba Yaga. In this and other later works, Rou would include more and more contemporary Soviet pop culture references. In Barbara the Fair with the Silken Hair, another Russian folktale, Yeremy the Tsar is forced to make a deal with Chudo Yudo, the mythical ruler of a fantasy world, to give up his child. Yeremy orders his baby to be switched with that of a fisherman, but the woman given the task doesn't go through with the plan. 18 years later, Yeremy must pay the debt and throws Prince Andrei, a lazy and rude young man, into the well leading to Chudo's kingdom. Failing to pass challenges by Chudo and his daughter Barbara, the prince is about to be executed. When Andrei, the fisherman's son, hears of this, he rushes through Chudo's world to rescue the prince. Mikhail Pugovkin, a famous comedy actor, returning from the previous picture, joined the team of Rou's regular actors. Barbara the Fair became one of Rou's most successful pictures, with many of its lines becoming humorous quotes.
Мне, царь-батюшка, такая идея.
Идея?
Ну, это жульство в голову пришло.
Упитанный, а не воспитанный.
Дочка-то у тебя красивая?
Очень, вся в меня.
В тебя?
Instead of a typical male warrior hero, the main character of The Golden Antlers is a mother on a quest to save her children. Yevdokia's two daughters get lost in the forest and are captured by Baba Yaga and her friends Leshi, the traditional forest spirit, and Kikimora, a swamp-dwelling female creature. Yevdokia's son tries to save them, but suffers the same fate. Assisted by Golden Antlers, a magical deer representing nature, Yevdokia travels to speak with the sun, then the moon, and eventually the wind. She fights through Yaga's traps and finally takes on the witch herself. With most of the story taking place in the dark forest, it was one of Rou's less colorful films and did not enjoy the success of Rou's other works. After the release of The Golden Antlers, Rou began work on a musical fantasy film called Finist, the Brave Falcon, writing the screenplay and assembling the cast. Alas, he would not get the chance to direct it. On December 28, 1973, possibly affected by kidney disease, Aleksandr Rou passed away, aged 67. Beginner director Gennady Vasilyev finished the project, dedicating the film to Rou. Even with Rou gone, Finist retained some of the quality which made Rou's works so unique. The titular character, a farmer helped by a pet falcon, defends his village from bandits, drawing the ire of the villain Kartaus. His minion Kastruk, played by Milyar, lures Finist into a dungeon and turns him into a monster. Alyonushka, Finist's beloved, turns to the commander of a local garrison for help. On the way to save Finist, Alyonushka meets clever soldier Yashka the clerk, a married couple who perpetually argue, and three musical old ladies. The death of Rou was a great loss. His passing, combined with the death of his rival Alexander Ptushko in the same year, ended an era in Soviet fantasy films. Through a career which spanned for 5 decades, Rou introduced several generations of adults and children to epic heroes and legendary villains, to kind mages and scheming witches, to the strange and surreal world of Russian fairy tales. In the next episode, we'll take a look at the film adaptations of Russian literary classics, the stories of Chekhov, the dilemmas of Dostoevsky, and the chronicles of Tolstoy.